This programme was made with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. On the Heritage Channel tonight, the renovation of the Ross Tiger, public artwork in Grimsby and the legend of folk singing. Welcome to the Heritage Channel, where we explore the fascinating history of North East Lincolnshire in a monthly roundup of news, views and local stories. At the Fishing Heritage Centre, the Ross Tiger has been undergoing some much needed repairs and restoration. Hugh Richards and John Williamson went along to find out more.
The Ross Tiger, the museum trawler at Grimsby's Fishing Heritage Centre, has reopened after essential work to protect her deck. 40 years working at sea were less damaging than the last 20 years of visiting tourists and Grimsby weather.
She was getting a little bit not nice for the public, you know, for the decks were a bit uneven and quite a few trip hazards, and obviously having been stuck here for 20 years, the wood wasn't in best condition, and apparently it's since she's been here that most of the damage has been done, because the seawater 9 times out of 10 would come on the deck and straight off. But you know, would have been sat here for 20 years, and apparently it's rainwater that's done a lot of the damage.
During the last 6 months, uneven wooden planking on the fish deck was removed to reveal the steel deck in good condition. Local companies grit blasted the metal and laid special paint before adding a protective mesh where the visitors walk.
All of that corrosion, all of that rot's disappeared, and the ship's now protected and preserved for the future.
The Tiger is one of the most accessible and prominent tourist attractions in the town. Her future depends on celebrating her past.
The Ross Tiger is 65 years old, considerably younger than most of the men who sailed her. This redecking means that her future is guaranteed.
It really means a lot, because we, at the Heritage Centre, we want people to look at that ship and not just see a piece of steel nicely painted up. That is part of the heritage of this town. That's the life and soul of this town.
That history on the high seas was just another day's work for an old salt.
Mostly, I would say 90% of the people who used to do it would do it, including myself. If I had the chance to take that ship to sea again now, I would jump at it.
Young visitors are not made of the same stuff.
You'd have about 12 men on here. You don't have enough men to sort of work shifts, so if there's a lot of fish that you're catching, you go to bed when the skipper says you do. You might be the thick end of 3 days without any proper sleep, which blows the minds of school children. Oops. Speaking of blowing your mind.
Paint the Town Proud was an ambitious project to celebrate the rich history of our coastal community in a series of monumental murals that have changed the landscape of the town.
And sorry if anybody was expecting a curtain. I just wanted to say, this artwork.
People are talking about it. It's going viral on Twitter and Facebook, it is. And to be honest, so it should be.
I mean, you tell from the people, you judge from the people, and they've loved it.
I cannot remember ever seeing anything like this in Grimsby.
This mural is the culmination of an amazing project.
It needed to be talked about beyond Grimsby. When we first started the project, we realised that what we'd said on paper wasn't going to be as easy to deliver. Can we, produce these huge pieces of artwork in the middle of the town centre? There was actually quite a mind shift that needed to happen in order to do that. To achieve the scale of Garibaldi Street by the end of the project in just 18 months is quite mind-blowing, really. So. Grimsby has such a rich heritage, and a lot of it is under-celebrated.
We don't have enough work that's celebrating our local area and the heritage, because we do have so much heritage.
We've lost so much of the town over the years, and this in a small way will bring it back.
The purpose of the project, right from the off, was to celebrate pride in our local heritage. I think it came from Creative Start, a suggestion for the name Paint the Town Proud, and there's no arguing with that. That's exactly what we aim to do.
You can watch the full documentary that followed the progress of the project now on the Heritage Channel.
No day is the same.
Every day is very different, always different challenges to meet and learning lots along the way.
Sometimes you feel as though every day is the same, but it's not. Every day is a different challenge.
1 minute they don't know who you are, and just that little smile when they recognise you or they recognise a song, it just brings tears to your eyes, And to know that at the end of the day you have helped them to live the day as best they can.
In September 2019, Kirsty and I had the privilege of meeting one of our folk heroes, a talented singer-songwriter from Santa Barbara, California, who in 1964 would become the first solo folk singer to be signed by a major record label.
I'd rather be a sparrow than a snake. Yes, I would. If I only could, I surely would.
Bringing folk singing to a wider audience and paving the way for the popularity of people like Joan Baez, Bob Dylan and Paul Simon. In the 60s and 70s, she featured on the avant-garde TV show The Frost Report before starring in her own TV series. We caught up with this 80-year-old legend in the summer of 2019 at the recording studios, where she was laying down a track for her new album after playing a live gig the night before. At the time, we didn't know this would be her last public interview, as she died a few months later. Last month was the 3rd anniversary of her passing, and tonight we pay tribute to this legend of folk, who is one of the artists who formed the soundtrack to the lives of those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s, loving the folk music of the era.
I walk the winter's beach, I've so little to remember. The year is growing old, already it's December.
So Julie, thanks for joining us on Billboard today. You first came to England in the 60s,
yes.
1964?
Yeah, I think I actually came in 63, and my first album was released in 64.
Okay. But before that, you've been touring Europe?
Well, I was kind of just a beatnik. I was just wandering around. I wasn't actually counting on being a professional singer. I just sort of ran out of money, and so I started singing in bars and restaurants and sort of made my way around. And then and I came to visit a friend in London, and then some Scottish folk singers that I met in Germany took me along to a folk club, and I sang some songs, and there was a guy called Bruce Dunnett, and he made a tape, and he took it to David Platts at Essex Music, and David took it to Hugh Mendel at Decca Records, and they just sort of talked to me, and it was when Baez and Dylan were kind of coming to the fore, and I was the first folk singer to sign with a major label, so that sort of like opened up the future.
The whole world of folk for people, yeah.
I'm not lonely. I'm not lonely. I'm not lonely.
I think one of your early influences, not so much for your music, but your lifestyle, was some of the beat poets like Jack Kerouac.
Yeah, I mean, that was why I kind of wanted to travel. It was definitely Jack Kerouac on the road that influenced me to just go and taste life, you know, because growing up in Southern California, I was kind of isolated. I'd been to Mexico to see my family, my grandparents, but I'd never been to anywhere else. So I just wanted to go to Europe and see the rest of the world.
Now, I understand your father was a big early influence on your music.
Yes, well, my father was born and raised in Mexico, in Sonora, and he came to the States in his late teens. And he became a mariachi musician, and he could play the guitar, the accordion, and the piano. But he always played music, and he taught me. Well, my mother gave me a ukulele once, and I started the ukulele. I couldn't play it, so my dad taught me to play that. And then when I was in high school, I was 17, and somebody wanted me to accompany them on the guitar. And so I asked my dad to show me the other two strings, you know, and so he taught me, and then I started playing, and I play at parties and fun, you know. People would say, "Come to my party and bring your guitar." So I became quite popular with the parties when I was at university.
While the young people's blood flows out of their bodies and's lost in the mud, you've thrown the worst fear.
And of course, those sort of influences were there in you know, your most well-known record and hit in If I Could, which I think everyone remembers you for.
Yeah, that was the first record I made with Mickey Most. It was really,
at DK.
It was really. It was great working with him. I really, before that, I was just put in a little box and told to sing, you know, and then they all the musicians. And Mickey brought me into the mixing room and listened to different tracks, and it was before all the digital stuff, so you had to do a mix, you know, like and I was like mixing it, and it was so exciting.
I'd rather be a hammer than a nail. Yes, I would. If I only could, I surely would.
On your travels, you also met someone who I think became a lifelong friend, and that's Leonard Cohen.
Yeah. I was just thinking, apparently there's just a film that's come out about Marianne and Leonard. And I know they came and interviewed me once, but I didn't know if it was part of the thing or not. But my friends wrote me and said that, that I am part. So I'm really touched, because Marianne was a dear friend of mine as well. And to lose them both in the same year was really devastating. But yes, when I left America, when I told you that I left America, I went across to New York with my friend, and we took a boat to Patras in Greece. And her brother was living on the island of Hydra with his partner. So they met us there, and then we took a little kaiki over to Hydra. And there were several writers and painters. They were all very creative people. It wasn't it was before package days and all that. And I met this young poet called Leonard Cohen, and he used to borrow my Mexican guitar that my dad gave me when I left, and he would sing union songs. So he wasn't writing his own songs, and I wasn't either. I mean, we just sort of sang some songs together, and then when I met him a couple of times on the continent, and then when he became a musician and a songwriter, he sent me his album. And that's just when I had done the Frost Report, and that's just when I started my own series. And so I talked to Stanley Dorfman. He said, "Yeah, let's put him on the show." So that was the first time he'd ever been on television in Europe.
Now it's come to distances that both of us must try. Your eyes are soft with sorrow.
Hey, that's no way to say goodbye.
My series was the first in color, and anywhere, it was on the BBC, and they needed the tape because it was very expensive in those days. So all of the shows are wiped. It's just such a tragedy. I had, people like Tim Buckley, Dusty Springfield, and Richard Harris, and Spike Milligan.
All the songs they sing, they wrote themselves. They're Robin and Mike, the incredible string band.
Also, before your own show, you were part of probably the most avant-garde piece of television of the time with David Frost.
Yeah, yeah.
And this sort of juxtaposition between the traditional folk and this sort of avant-garde TV show, you know, it was really interesting.
Yeah, well, it was because up to then they had used jazz singers, Millicent Martin, and when they were doing the pilot for the Frost Report, they used a jazz singer and me, but then they decided to go with the folk thing, you know. So, and they said that each program would be a different subject, you know. And they said, like, we're going to have one on education. Do you know any songs on education? And I thought of Tom Paxton's. What did you learn in school today?
Yeah.
So luckily I got in there at the right time.
Zoo, zoo, how about you? You can come too. We're going to the zoo, zoo. Mama's taking us to the zoo tomorrow. Mama's taking us to the zoo.
And I had it was a live show, you know, and I had no idea because I hadn't really done very much television at all before that, and you know, I never realized that when we were actually in the studio that millions of people were watching, you know, so it was quite mind blowing.
Yeah. And after your success during the 60s and 70s and early 80s with an album every year and various singles, you stopped.
Yeah, I got a bit fed up with the sort of commercial side of everything, and so I stopped singing, and I went back to California for a while, and I got involved with yoga and meditation, those things of sort of soul searching, you know, and then I went on I lived in Norway for a year before that, and they were organizing a peace march in Central America because that was the time when the Sandinistas were legally elected government, and Ronald Reagan was trying to bring them down because they were a socialist government. They're still doing the same thing today.
I just want you to know I can see through your masks. You that never done nothing.
So when I got back from that march, I decided there was still a lot to sing about. So I came back to England and started singing.
But you started singing about things that were important to you rather than just commercial songs then.
Well, yeah, but I think I always sort of did, but in a more, not in such a personal experience of it. You know, like I sang Masters of War in 1964, because, you know, that was Vietnam and everything. I mean, we were all against the war, but the personal contact that I experienced in Central America was very influential.
Yeah. And you also sort of, behind your music, you also discovered a more spiritual side to life.
I went to Glastonbury, and I went into a bookshop there called the Gothic Image, and the owner, Jamie George, lovely man, said that he took tours of magical Britain, and it was basically around the Arthurian legends. And would I come and be the resident troubadour? And I thought that sounded really fun, because they went to Scotland, they went to Cornwall, and places that I hadn't been. I learned about earth mysteries and the power of the land. And then I really got to find out that there was a whole history of matriarchal influences that had been erased. You know, we said God the Father, God. They said, somebody said, they decided God was a man, then all men decided they were God. And then I found out from the goddess movement that the female deity was worshipped, you know, all, especially in Wales and Ireland.
There's a woman who lives in the desert. There's a woman who dwells in the night. You can hear her moving in the shadows. See her shadow in the pale moonlight.
So how do you view the world now compared with the world as it was in the 60s when we grew up?
Well, there was a lot more optimism in the 60s. In the 60s, we were concerned, we wanted to change the world. Now I just go, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen? And I mean, I'm still singing and still praying and still doing my rituals to try to bring good energy into the world.
Rather be a sparrow than a snake.
So I don't think anyone can get their head around the idea that you recently celebrated your 80th birthday.
Well, I recently celebrated my 81st birthday.
Yeah, but you had a big celebration.
Yeah, a great big celebration. Yeah, that was really great.
What did you do?
Well, I had a concert in London, and my friend John Paul Jones, he was a bass player with Led Zeppelin, and he's a good, really dear friend. I've known him for years, and he came and played mandolin on 4 or 5 songs with me. It was just beautiful. And then at the end, we all got together, and John playing and Madeline, and we sang Forever Young together, and it was just magic. It was just, you know, we really had so much fun, and the audience did too. So that was so. Now I'm heading for my 90th.
Well, I mean, you're 82 now.
No, 81.
81, sorry.
Don't make me worse, it's bad enough.
I'll cut that bit out.
1938 I was born.
Yeah. So you're 81 now. Last night you were gigging?
Yeah, and the night before I was gigging.
Yeah. Today you're in a recording studio?
Yeah.
What keeps you going?
Well, I think a lot of it is the music. You know, people ask me about that, and I really come to appreciate it much more than I did when I was younger. And I think that anybody that is involved creatively, they kind of have a source to the creator. And so whether you're in music or painting or doing the gardening, something that really takes all your being to get involved with it, I think that keeps you young. So I invite everybody to go out and be creative.
Well, Julie, you're a great inspiration to people of my generation that grew up with you when you were in the 60s, and a great inspiration to the new generation of young people and folk singers. Thanks for joining us on Billboard.
I'd rather be a forest than a street. Yes, I would. If I could, I surely would.
That's all from the Heritage Channel for tonight. From Alex, Elise, Gemma, Hugh, John, Kirsty and all the team at the Heritage Channel, thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next month for more heritage news, views and local stories, including the restoration of a sculpture that is an important part of our cultural heritage. The programmes on the Heritage Channel are made with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund.